Hey, welcome everyone. I'm truly excited to have you here. I'm going to wait a few for more of you all to come in, but today is the first episode in my new series, Conversation with Poets. So we're starting here. I'm going to give just a second or two for more people to come in. Really excited to have you all in here. I'm going to bring Holly in just a moment. But today is my first episode of my new series, and hopefully you all can hear me well because unbeknownst to me, of my street, all of a sudden wanted to do street repair. So the repair people are outside repairing my street, so it's quite noisy. I hope you don't hear that. I hope we have enough isolation in here that you can just hear me. But if you do hear it, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about it. It's just people working on the street, repairing the street. But today is the first episode in my new series called Conversation with Poets. I wanted to start this series because I just released my new book, my new poetry book, Only Feed Me Life. It came out March 6th, the day after my birthday. And I've been dreaming of doing a series where I get together with some of my favorite poets who have really inspired me, not just my writing, but they just what they speak of and their viewpoint on the world and how they see the world. And I wanted to sit down with them and have a conversation, a different type of conversation, one where me and the poet that I'm talking with, we each read each other one of our favorite poems about a particular topic, and then we have a conversation based upon those poems and that topic. And so that's what this series is going to be about. And today is the first episode, and my first guest is probably one of my favorite people in the world. I first came across this person when I first actually came across this person through her husband. You may know her husband, Dr. Robert Holden. He is a best-selling author, a Hay House darling. He's written many books, one of which is one of my favorite books on the topic of self-love. I think it's the best book written on self-love. It's called Lovability. But I had not really heard of her, had just come across her husband. And I was, my first interaction with him, I was reading his books and looking at his stuff online. And then I think I saw an interview of the two of them together. And I began to research her. And I just fell deeply in love with her writing. She's one of my favorite spiritual teachers in the world, and she's one of my favorite poems. Her poems were such an inspiration to me because they were poems that really spoke to the heart of things that we're all dealing with and how to look at the wholeness of ourselves with compassion and love and really heal. Her poetry is really deeply touches on that. And even if you've never heard of her name, again, my guest today is Hollie Holden. I'm about to bring her in. Even if you've never heard of her name, I'm sure you've read one of her poems because one of her poems a few years ago went viral. And when I meant viral, I saw it everywhere. People were sharing it everywhere. I heard therapists talk about it and share it. Healers were talking about it and sharing it. Artists were talking about it, sharing it. I saw people opening events by reading it. I just saw so many people sharing it. I think it's been shared over 1 million times on social media, and some of that I know I saw it from many of you all who were even on here on this live. I saw it shared from many of you all. Even shared without giving her credit, without her name attached to it. But you've seen her poetry. It is so beautiful. And so it's going to be a great honor to introduce her and have her come in with this conversation with me. We became friends shortly after that. It's just funny how the universe brings things around. Someone who was an inspiration to me, who seemed like a superstar and a celebrity to me in the world of spirituality and poetry, became a close friend. And I'm just so honored to have her as the first guest here and to have a deep conversation about the body with Hollie Holden. So without further ado, let me bring her in. 1 second. if you're there, Holly, I just put you. I see the basically the video keeps freezing. I hope it's not me. Oh, there you are.
I did it.
Hey,
I pressed all the buttons and it happened. I'm so happy. It was kind of a thing of luck, I tell you.
this is my first time doing this, so on both of our sides.
Jerome, thank you for having me. And that was such a beautiful introduction. I thought, oh, great, I'll go home now. That's, you've said it all. It's so
I have not even
moving.
touched the surface of everything that I want to say, and you know that. I love you so much, and it is just to have you as my first poet is just so apropos because your poetry was probably the first. I've been reading poetry all my life, right, since I was young, but your poetry was probably the first that really hit my heart and really made me say, oh, wait, no, poetry could be medicine. Like it could be medicine. And I had never really felt that. I've been moved by poetry and touched by poetry and inspired by poetry and changed by poetry, but I had never really read something that felt like medicine to something that was hurting or something that was asking to be healed. And so until I read your work. So thank you.
Well, I mean, Jerome, look, I will say from my end, I'm sitting here with a hot off the press copy of your new book, which Robert and I read. And again, just like I guess I think when we're sort of connected in the way that we are, I guess our medicine is also each other's medicine on this journey. And so equally, you know, I read your poems and I just go, oh my gosh, I can only read one at a time because I have to let it affect me and sink in. And then I can come back and read another one like a couple of days later. And, and I really do feel like the poet part of us that wants to come forward and share things, there's such generosity in it because it is such a gift. But I'm curious about how you experience it though, Jerome, because I feel like it only comes out as a gift when it's truly authentically a gift for me. And which is the same as that's the whole journey, right? With healing, it's like when we receive it for ourselves, we get to represent it, but also give it. But we have
Yeah.
to do it for ourselves first. And you know, the poem that I have chosen to read today, this one was it was a given. It was one of those poems that was given to me from the depths of love within me, and it came bursting through me. I was having a shower, and that's where all my best inspiration hits, when I'm washing up or drying my hair or in the shower or doing or scrubbing something. You know, it kind of just suddenly it's like, oh, where's my notebook? I've got to go and run and write this down. And this poem was so kind to me in the moment. I was so moved, and I ran and I wrote it down, and I wasn't going to share it with anyone because it felt so personal. It was probably the most personal thing I've ever received. And then a friend of mine said, you have to I shared it with her, and she said, you have to share this. And what was so interesting is that then it just got so popular, and I realized, like, oh, if I really receive a gift, then it gets given to everyone, you know. And so yeah, it's just very lovely speaking about it with you, because our conversations, I've been so excited for the last few days. I'm talking to Jerome in real life. It's so exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, going back to what you said, for me, one, thank you so much for saying that. One, having my book, um, reading my book, and the delicious words that you just shared, but that you've also shared before with me about what you've read have just, I think you and I have talked about this before. When you write poetry, is like they literally are pieces of my heart. Like I personally, and I'm not saying anybody can, I'm not saying this has to be the way anybody has to do it, but I can't write anything that isn't like really centered right in there. Like right, it has to be rooted and grounded right in the middle of my heart. And I'm learning more and more about how to do that, like how to reach the places, what's really in my heart, what's really down there, what really wants to be said. But when you have something and you put something out there, right, that is your heart. It is your raw piece of your heart. You know, so there's a piece of being a poet that is it's probably one of the most vulnerable places that I've been, right? And in that book, there are things I wrote about that I hadn't spoken about from that perspective ever before. And I knew that they needed to be said that way. But then to have you say such beautiful things about it, just it's beyond what I could say. And I really get it. I get when you there's because it also does that piece that you're talking about. It's that this was me, right? I didn't sit down and write it and say, "Ooh, this is what they're going to think about this," or this is what Jerome needed to say, and this is what Jerome needed to hear. And then when it goes out into the world and people mirror back and they say, "Oh, this really moved me," or "This really touched me," it's the evidence of our connection, of our oneness, of our we're all in this together, and we're as I give myself my medicine, I'm giving medicine to somebody else, even if that's not my intention. So that's the that I fully feel you on that, and thank you also for mirroring that back to me.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a lovely place to start because, as an introvert as well, I feel like I kind of send a poem out and then I go and hide for a really long time because it's really vulnerable. It's like I'm showing you something of me, of the depths of me, of usually where love meets one of my struggles. Like that's what I find when I write. Like I start from the struggle and then the love meets me and then the poem goes in the direction that I could never have planned it because it's like I'm sharing the moment where I get met by love in somewhere that really hurts me usually.
Mm.
And so that can't be for anyone else. It can't be for show. It can't be, oh, so and so might like this or this might be a good one. There's something about poetry that's so pure and raw and authentic, has a way of expressing ourselves. And a poem can be 5 words. It can be one word. The form, that's what I love. You're so free in the form. But the point is that it's the ultimate way of being authentically in touch with ourselves. But it's also that everything we are and all the personal development work we're doing is held in every poem. And we also are transmitting the love that we find within us through our deep inner work and our commitment to ourselves and to serving. That's what comes through our poems. Like that's why people love them. And that's why when a poem touches us, it's partly about the words and the content, and it's partly about who that person is and what they hold in them. It's like the poem is just a little top of the iceberg thing, the tip of the iceberg. But what you receive when you really take it in is the fullness of that person's presence.
Yeah.
And so it really matters when you're writing to be really in your life fully, and then writing from the places in your life where, in my dedication in my life is to let love meet everything in me. Like really, really let love meet everything in me, and to be brave enough to stand there and let it happen. And writing is the place, or one of the places, where I I have to hand over the process as I'm writing and go, I don't know where this is going to lead, actually, but invariably I get met by this loving presence within that just goes, and here's the medicine for that, and then the words come from there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I had never really I was just having a whole moment while you were talking because I never really that is exactly my process. And I never had you said it so beautifully. I start with the struggle, and then as I'm writing, I let love meet me there. And then love writes the rest, right? And I just, and if and almost in every poem in my book that I'm as I read it, like that is the problem that you can see, like that we start with the struggle and then we love meets and then we end with what love wants to say about this. And that is why, my greatest intention when I decided to put this out, because my intention for writing it was I was at a place that I needed love to meet me. And poetry is a place where love meets me. And it was solely selfish. I wasn't thinking about putting this book out into the world. I was like, I just need to write poetry because I need love to meet me in some spaces. And when I finished, I was like, I want this book. It wasn't about, oh yeah, like, let me be a star and all that. It was about if people reading this book can be met with love in even the tenth of the amount that I was in writing it, then then I'm fine. Then that's it. No matter what happens, if you are met with love somewhere, if one of these poems in here touches you with love, then I've done what it came to do, right? I've done what it came to do. And so but thank you for that, because I had never really put it that way. I thought about that, but that's, you know, I, what in the writing of this book, one of the things that came about for me was this concept of really understanding poetry is medicine too. It's medicine. Poetry is medicine as well. And it's medicine because, I was thinking, before this conversation with you, it's medicine because it allows you to speak to the parts and meet the parts of you that you weren't meeting, and reveal and be true and be raw and bring parts of your truest self out. But you just gave me this piece just right here that it's medicine because you love will meet you in the middle of it. And love is always the medicine. It is the medicine always. But it will meet you in the middle of it if you show up and you're honest and you offer yourself to it. It will meet you in the middle of it. And that is what happened for me. That's what happens for me when I read your work. I think that was probably the first place where I really understood it, was when I read your poems. I was like, oh no, 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 no. Love is right here and it has a message and it wants to meet me in this. And I think I think I want to actually transition with that to have you read your poem,
Yeah.
your first poem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerome, it's a wise move because I tell you, you and I, we know that we could talk for 6 hours about one small thing. So let's go for it. This is actually about poetry, so let's read it. Yeah, and it's so funny because whenever I'm with you, I get all this inspiration about things, and I feel like this is what we need to collaborate on. I feel like this is where this is yes, I'm just noting that that's very alive in me right now. Writing as a spiritual practice. So this poem is called, well, it has different titles. I like to call it Love Me Like This. So this is the one. And I wrote this in 2017, apparently, according to this piece of paper. I never know what year it is or what's going on, but it's quite a while ago. Okay, love me like this. Today, I asked my body what she needed, which is a big deal, considering my journey of not really asking that much. I thought she might need more water, or protein, or greens, or yoga, or supplements, or movement. But as I stood in the shower, reflecting on her stretch marks, her roundness where I would like flatness, her softness where I would like firmness, all those conditioned wishes that form a bundle of never quite rightness, she whispered very gently, could you just love me like this?
One of my absolute favorites from you. Mm, okay. I am going to read you. So people have been asking, I see on here that what they've been asking about, the title of my book is called Only Feed Me Life. Um, I went back and back and back and forth about which one I wanted to read with you. So I wanted to choose something different. So I am going to read, and it's so apropos actually, because we've been talking about vulnerable. So this is something that was very vulnerable for me to write, and something where love met me in the middle of it. So this is just so apropos. So this one is entitled Your Kidneys Have Failed. Your kidneys have failed. Doctors have such a violent way of speaking. Me, I think they're just sleeping, dreaming of days when I'll know how to take better care of myself. Not by eating better per se, but by better tending to what's been eating at me. By not letting days go by again without dancing, without singing, without making silly, nonsensical jokes about how big butts don't lie, without gazing out of the window until the next poem comes, without tending to what's in my heart before I tend to what's in my inbox, without saying no more until I clearly hear my yes, without feeling more free, feeling more joy, feeling more like me. I think they will wake up again one day. You see, anyone who lives in bondage will sleep so that they can dream of freedom. My kidneys have not failed. They are simply trying to temporarily escape a life they were not built for. I will wake them again. Once I have become more of a delicious life than their wildest dreams, I will wake them again. I promise. So here we are on the body.
Here we are.
So take me back to you're in the shower and this poem comes.
Mm.
When you get to those last two lines, what's the feeling?
Well, I first want to say how beautiful your poem is, Jerome. I mean, I'm taking a moment just to digest it because there's so much aliveness in it. And I somehow haven't read that one yet. So that was my first contact with that poem. And I feel like each poem is kind of like a being. It's like each one has its own presence, its own life force. And so I'm just really absorbing your poem as I'm sitting here. And what's interesting about your question is that the feeling that came over me, and that's in a way the most interesting question we can ask is what, not so much how did it come or how did you figure it out or whatever. It's like, how did it feel when it landed? Because that's what you and I, like, that's what we're talking about. That's what we're up to with our work and our creativity. And it felt to me like I had been, and this is the thing, this is it. I felt like I had been met by the deepest love I know that is within me. I had been met in one of the hardest places for me to love me, as in my personality, my structures. Like, this is it's often in a place where I'm like, other people may be able to see this about me, but I can't get there myself.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that gets undone in that when I receive a poem like that final line kind of, it sort of took my breath away a little bit, because I just wasn't really expecting it to go there. And I feel like, yes, it's about the body, but it's also about my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
It's also about every part of me, which you speak to so beautifully in your work. Whenever I read your posts and what you're up to, it's like this place of allowing ourselves to be loved and therefore healed in the places that feel the most unlovable in us. And and so the feeling for me was just that kind of pure rush of lovedness, that kind of sweetness, like it's a little bit tearful, it's very moving, it feels kind of gentle and fierce at the same time. It's like the softest touch, but it comes from the firmest place, the kind of the most profoundly truthful place. And it feels like the love that I've experienced over the years in my life that has really forged me into who I am. Meeting me in a really mundane place, which I guess that's why it's so moving to me, because it's like, well, that means I can bring anything. Like really, really, if I can bring this struggle, if I can bring this thing, then this love loves me in every place. And so I think it was a feeling of, I guess what happens for me is when the love reaches me in a really difficult to reach place that I've struggled with, it kind of then expands outwards to other places. Like there's a flooding in my system of like a lot of dry patches get rained on, you know? So yeah, that's kind of how it felt when it landed.
When I first encountered that poem, when I got to the last line, it was like, again, the last line, can you just love me like this? Just it was I know poetry is for me. I know a poem is for me when I can feel it in my body. Like I feel it. It's not even like it's not in my head. And there's beautiful poetry that just lands in the head. Um, it's not just in the ears, but like there's something that happens in my body. It's there. And when I read that last line, one of my biggest challenges across my life, and it was probably my doctorate level course, and I think I'm at a place where I have my doctorate now, right? But it was my master lesson here, was learning to really love my body as it is. Um, and that line was like, oh, that's it. That's it. Like, he's not asking for more green juice. He's not asking for an extra day at the gym. He's not asking for, um, better clothes or anything. He's asking for just right here in this present moment with all that he is and he isn't. Can you just love him like this? And it was just, I was like, oh, this is, and of course, and like you said, like we started with this, like when we touch into the deepest place of ourselves and we let it be met with love, what we find is that place, well, at least let me speak for me. What I find is when I speak to the deepest places in me that need to be touched with love, and I let them finally be touched with love, and then I share that. I share out, what was it being touched with love, and how love touched it. What I find is that's the thing that everybody latches onto. And so it was no coincidence, like we were talking about, like this was the poem, the millions. I've seen it everywhere, right? And I don't think it's a coincidence because that's the thing. I think so many of us, as we're talking about the body,
Yeah.
want to finally meet our bodies with love for real.
Yeah.
And that last line is just so, it is what love looks like when you meet the body. We think the body, we're in so many other narratives where love looks like meeting the body with green juice and this detox and this body snatching surgery and this skin tightening cream and this, and not saying that those things are, unloving in and of themselves, but I think the greatest love that we have that you speak to so deeply in this poem is like to just whatever is right here, to see it and embrace it, whatever it is. And I know at that time in my life, 2000, I think I might have come across it like right after you wrote it and presented it in 2017. Um, Shortly after you put it out, I might have been one of the first people that came across it. And that was definitely, I had been on many journeys, a long journey of that, but I had not yet quite let love meet my body. And that poem was definitely a part of that process to where I am now, where I'm just love has met my body, and I do not allow it anything else to meet it. You know, but that was So the feeling of that, and I wanted to it brought up another question for me for you, because I don't know if this was the case with this poem or if you find this with your poems, but a lot of times, and I think you're kind of alluding to it, so this is what I wanted to see. When you finish it, and it's that last thing, does it almost seem for you as if like, oh, this was a message for me and this came through and I had no idea this was it until it came and you're like, oh, oh,
Yeah.
oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I would say that is definitely what happens when I write is that I'm surprised by what comes, because it's coming from that deep well of wisdom within. So it's not something I could have thought my way to. That's the difference. It's like it's not a crafted. I didn't spend hours crafting that. It kind of began to come, and I was like, oh, but that, especially the last line, was a surprise for me. It was like a gift for me, for sure. And I guess what I love about it is that it's exactly that. It surprised me, and I think it surprises people when they read the poem for the first time, in the same way that it surprised me when I wrote it for the first time, kind of thing. Well, for the only time that I wrote it. And I feel like the reason it strikes a chord with people is because we can all relate to I'm trying to love myself by having more protein and more greens and doing more yoga and all those things. But it flips that narrative on its head, and it's this other way of seeing our bodies, seeing ourselves. What if we could start by loving ourselves where we are? Then it's great to add more protein. It's great to do more yoga. I've just got back into yoga. I feel so pleased with myself. It's like a profound miracle that I did a yoga class today. I'm like, seriously, I had to call my husband Robert, and I was like, you'll never guess what I did. I actually walked in the room, I took my shoes off, I got on the mat, But it's like, if I did that yoga class from a place of pushing myself or punishing myself for not having done yoga for the however long a break I've had from it, if I punished myself for, oh, look, I've lost so much of my flexibility, that's all available for me in that moment, right? I can feel it. They're all pathways, very well-worn pathways in me. I'm not doing well enough. She's definitely going to come and adjust me in a minute, because I'm pretty sure what I'm doing is not what I'm seeing, all those things. And I'm not fit enough. And all those voices are there. But if I do it from a place of, okay, well, let me love myself in my inflexibility. Let me love myself in my self-consciousness. Let me love myself in the fact that I don't feel strong enough to hold my arms up for as long as everyone else right now. Let me just love myself in that. That's such a different orientation. So it feels to me like this poem, when it came, it was like, you can do all the stuff you like, but if you don't marry that up with love, it's kind of empty gestures to your body. Your body's like, that's not going to fill me up. The thing that's going to fill me up is feeling loved and accepted for where I am, and then change can come from there. Because in one way, you could read this poem, if you wanted to use it that way, and go, oh, well, I just won't do any self-care then. That's not what it's saying. It's saying, to me, it's like, start from acceptance, start from softness, start from compassion, start from love, start from wisdom, start from like the deeper place, and then be guided as to what would be loving from that place. Because you can drink a green juice because you're starving yourself or punishing yourself or trying to control yourself or limit your intake of calories. You can do that, or you can drink a green juice because it's what has naturally arisen from being in a loving relationship with yourself to the best of your ability. And then you go, hey, I would really like that. That feels really good. It's like an entirely different foundation. And I think most people are in a relationship with their bodies where they're either overeating, undereating, overworking out, underworking out, burning out, you know, or all the body's expressing something more difficult than that. So for me, just when I received that line, it was like, oh, hang on a minute. Like, because the other thing, Jerome, is I would say, and I think you'll understand this because I know I've read so much about what you've written. It's like, I think I was separating my body off from the love, right? So I could receive love in, oh, my vulnerable spots and my wounds, and, oh, that person was rude to me. Let me just kind of, support myself and do some therapy and whatever. But it was like I'd fenced off my body. Somehow my body was, for some reason, like unreachable. And so I think when I received that line in this poem, it was like, oh, no, it's all included. It's all included. And so there was this great big shift in me as well, of like the thing that I really thought was exiled was brought back into the center,
Yeah, yeah. And, this is something, as you're saying that, it reminds me of something that I learned from the two of you and Robert, is that you were beautifully speaking to it, but that there is no, when we start with love, or we ground it from love, like love is the foundation for which starts it, then whatever change, it, one, it has no toxicity in it, but also it sticks, right? And any change that we make that we do not ground it in love, it's not coming from love.
Yeah.
It just won't. And so it's a loop. It's just
Yeah.
we stay in this loop of always improving and fixing and changing and trying. But when it starts from love, the one is not coming from a lack place. It's coming from a nourished place, and that change, one, will probably, if we still desire it, right? If the change is still a desire, it's a love-based desire, and so that desire is seen through, and it kind of sticks. Whereas you're not in this toxic loop of always, 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 always. And so that's really, the body is. I look back on my own journey, and I'm thinking, God, my body is such my best friend, and how long I lived without recognizing him, right, and without treating him in the way that I would any one of my other best friends. Like, I would not starve one of my best friends from love. I would shower them from it. As a matter of fact, if I ever thought they were, they even missed a meal, I would make sure they got that meal. And that your poem just reminds me of that. It reminds me of, like, this is my best friend. And my best friend doesn't need anything else from me than my own authentic presence of love. That's all. That's the most thing it needs from me, right? My friends may ask some things here and there, but what they most need from me, what they most crave from me, and they're most yearning for me, and they're showing up for me, is my own presence of love. And just how much in my own journey I know that I had forgotten that for my own body, and how, again, poetry is such a gift, because just on a page you could be reminded and brought home to that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's like it's I guess in a way writing a poem is kind of doing the deep dive, and the deep dive could take many, many years, and then the poem is just the moment where you come up with the pearl, but the dive is like, and so inside the thank you to each other is like this thank you to showing up authentically in your life and being so dedicated to bringing love to everything, and then it's like, then the poem can kind of be born out of that process. And as you were speaking, what what was occurring to me, Jerome, was when you said befriending the body is what you were talking about, like really befriending the body. And I was thinking, well, how does it feel to have a really good friend? And I'm very grateful in my life. I know that very, very well. And one of the qualities of being in a profound, authentic friendship is that you're really listening to each other. You know, you're not thinking of what you're going to say next, or having ideas about what the person's saying, or any of the things that can happen a lot in communication. It's really deep friendship. Like, you really are listening. You're being changed by what the other person is saying. You know, I say something, I open a door into a whole new room, and you walk into that room with me and you go, hey, I'm going to stand in here and see what it feels like. Right. And then you open a door and I go, oh, I'd love to walk through that with you. And it's like walking through a house rather than just playing kind of ping pong, you know, backwards and forwards, who's right, who's wrong, all those things. And in a way, what we're saying is that the relationship that we have discovered is, and it's a process, right? So it's not like, oh, I'm just there and that's it, you know. It's a process, but our dedication is to being a true friend to ourselves, and having this friendship with our bodies instead of like a fight with our bodies. And to reference your poem, Jerome, the nature of that friendship requires us to listen. And that's the thing that I think is also missing from a lot of people's narratives about the body, is that the body isn't against us. The body is speaking to us. The body is, you know, you were saying in your poem, it's like the medical world told you something about your body, and you said, wait, let me listen to my body myself in my own authority. And actually what my body is saying is, I want you to live more authentically. And I am going to flag up some areas where you are blocking love. And I'm going to let you know, through how I feel and how I show up, I'm going to let you know, like a really good friend again, where your work is. And, you know, Jerome, the beauty of your work is that you're just constantly speaking to that process. And I think that's where we align so much, is this thing of, well, what if my body is my, what if my body is this channel for who I truly am in the world, and therefore that channel can be trusted. So I can listen and I can respond as I would to a friend. It's a very different narrative to what we're taught.
Yeah.
You know,
by
when I say taught, like, let's just also include like advertising companies
mm-hmm.
and social media with young people now. Don't get me started. You know, photoshopping nonsense. Like, we're getting subliminally and consciously like all of these messages all the time, and of course ancestrally, culturally. You know, so what we're talking about here is really radical. You know, yeah. It's a really big deal.
And even, you know, using poetry to speak it, because that was like the inspiration behind that poem, was like this very concept of, what if my body isn't this enemy? It is my best friend. It is loving. So as my best friend, not only do I love it, but it loves me like that. So no, it's not something violent like a failure. It's an opportunity to course direct back to love, right? And that it is guiding me to that, like a best friend will do. If there's something in our relationship where it has gone off the course and the route for love, the best friend is going to try to guide you back home to love, where you belong, and where the relationship of best friendships belong. They belong in the energy of love. And so when I was thinking about that, you know, as I have been on my journey and thought about, oh, I have gone through the majority of my life thinking about my body as some enemy to me, right? That I need to fight, or I need to conquer in some type of way. And what if this experience wasn't about that at all? It wasn't an enemy. It wasn't, again, the language, I think I start with, like, they have such a violent way of speaking. You know, this thing of failure automatically puts you in some aspect of adversary with your body. How dare you? We have things to do. How dare you fail in some way? And I thought, what if it wasn't? It's not a failure. And I don't need to speak to myself in such a violent way either. It's not a failure. It's sleeping. It needs to rest until it's time to wake back up to what it came here for, which is love. The body is to receive love. So yeah, I think that is, and we've been talking about this whole time. Like you can't get to that space and awareness um, without laying yourself at the altar of love and saying, "What's the message for me?" Right? And I the line that really came out of nowhere, we've been talking about that. That was my thing, right? It was like, oh, right? It was a huge thing. It's a line in there. I think it says something that anyone who is in bondage will sleep so that they can dream of freedom. And I was like, oh, they're asleep dreaming of freedom because I'm not free somehow. And that began my whole journey. I can't remember what year I wrote that in, but that began the journey of me looking at, oh yeah, where are we not living? Freedom to me is directly tied to being my true self, fully my true self, present in what it presently is. And where have I not been living that and bringing that out? And yeah, my kidneys are for a life of freedom. So that kind of was when that came out on the paper, I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yeah, so
Wait a
tell
minute.
me, let me ask you, so how did it feel? How did that kind of um when the loving presence met you as a in that poem, in that process, how did that feel for you?
It was a there was a few feelings. One was absolute relief. And the relief was I was released from a bondage of the narrative that one that this was a what's the word, chronic thing, that this was always going to be my situation, because what it told me was I don't always have to be in bondage. I can choose any moment not to be. And then the other part of it was, again, that this deep awareness, and that I had known before, but writing brings it like to a forefront in a way, probably deeper than anything. And somebody saying it to me talking about it. When I'm writing poetry, it comes out in a way that like just sits right at the forefront of my consciousness. And it was like, yeah, we are friends in this. We're
Mm.
partners in this thing. We're not. We're holding hands in a loving embrace. And we've watched over you, and now it's time for you to watch over us as we sleep. And let us gently, it was like, yeah, I have work to do while they sleep to prepare them. And then I'll gently, like, just to gently wait. And it was like when love, I love it. When love meets you, right? Whether it's in the line of a poem and something a stranger says, or your lover says to you, or whatever it is. When love really meets you in a place that you're struggling, there is this sense of like, it felt like surrender. That's what I want to say. It felt like I arrived and it was okay to finally let go. That's what it felt like. It was like, love's here. Oh my gosh, I now, I now love is here and I see it. And it's like a big exhale release. And
Really,
that it led me to be able to say that last
yeah,
line, like,
yes,
we'll wake them again.
and truthfully, say it, like to feel
And
it truthfully.
yeah,
Yeah,
and to say it very
yeah.
truthfully. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and what's so lovely about talking about our writing is that in a way our writing is our poetry is really just a delivery device for the love that we know within. It's just a way of bringing that outwards and upwards and into our experience, our lived experience. And then if we choose to share it, that our wish is that everybody knows that this is the love that's waiting to meet them. It's not like special to some people, it's not particular to someone, it's not like you have to write poetry. I mean, everyone, I do think it's important to say that as well, that like everyone receives this communication from this guiding force of love in different ways. And of course, you and I do as well. Like poetry is just one of the ways. But I think, when I teach, often people will say, well, I just don't receive guidance. And it doesn't take long in a conversation with somebody to open their mind about, well, hang on a minute, how does wisdom reach you? Like, what is your way? So I just want to also name that in this, in this discussion we're having, for anyone listening. It's like, it's amazing how it can reach us. It's the simplest way, but we are speaking specifically about poetry. And so I also would say, like, if you're drawn to this conversation, like, see what happens when you start to write. Just start scribbling some notes down. Like, as we're speaking, a title has come to me, and I don't know where it's going to lead me, but it's like I had to scribble it down, and just to be brave like that. Because I mean, a few years ago, I study and teach a Course in Miracles, the text of Course in Miracles, and that there was a particular year where I decided to write a commentary on every single day of there's 365 lessons in this workbook, and every single day I coach people through that. It's one of the things I do for my work. And I realized I wanted to write something down, but of course writing something down is so much more exacting than just discussing it and answering some questions and coaching and whatever. And I will tell you that every single day, every single of those 365 days, I had to meet the parts of me that were telling me the story that today love's not going to show up. Today I'm not going to have anything to offer. Today I'm going to have to say, this was the day when love didn't come when I sat down to write. Every day I had to sit with that and bring the love to that before I could even open up to the process. And it's the same with a poem. I go, who am I to receive a piece of inspiration or creativity or whatever it is? Like, you have to kind of meet those parts of you. But if you can just be loving towards yourself and your self-doubt and whatever else is going on for you, that on the other side of that is then an authentic experience of writing in order to hear your own deeper truth. And every single day it met me. I still can't believe it. It met me with images. It gave me this presence, gave me examples. It was like I was just led through what I had to bring forward. And it's the same with any form of expression, and you and I just happen to be very dedicated to that. But just to widen out the invitation, if you feel drawn to do this, it's like just being brave and going for it, really.
Yeah, I would 100% co-sign that and say, and add to that, like, just like you're saying, the courage to take your, whatever the struggle. This is what I've found as a poet. The courage to take that deepest one, and you know what the deepest one is. You know what it is, right? To take that deepest one, to sit with yourself, and to just, like you said, to show up with it. You're not trying to solve it. You're not trying to change it. You're just trying to show up with it. And what do you want to say about it, and what does it want to say about it, right? And you just sit with that, right? Don't have to make it beautiful, not trying to make it marvelous, not trying to, just sit with what wants to be said about that. And I had the very same experience with writing this book, because every day I said, I'm going to show up every day just for 30 minutes. And my commitment to myself was, I'm just going to show up with what's the most real, whatever the struggle is that wants to be met with love today. And if nothing is said, nothing is said, but I'm going to sit. I'm going to just be with this for 30 minutes, and that's it. Even if nothing comes out on my pen, nothing wants to be said, I'm just going to sit. Today, I want to talk about doctors saying kidney failure, and I'm just going to sit with that today. And that's how I'm going to sit with, right? And like you said, sometimes I was like, I'll get over there, I go to my writing room, and I sit there, and I'd be like, I don't have anything to say, right? There's nothing to say, and I'm sitting here, and sure enough, love would say, what about this? And it may not be the entire poem that day, right? But it would definitely be this whole concept that I had never thought about. What about this? What about this? What about this? And I think that is, you know, I, I hear, like you said, like you started with, people say they don't hear guidance. Um, and you may not be called to be a poet, because I think poetry is just a form of bringing your guidance out in the public, right? Writing your own guidance down
Yes.
in the public scene.
Yes, exactly. That's all it really is.
That's all it really is, right? And so a lot of times I encourage people to just let that be the process for them. That nobody will read it but you. Like, don't even think about, I'm going to share this with anybody. Just, this is for me. But sit with the dedication, and I will sit with my heart, with what's really on my heart about everything that's in my life, and offer it. Like, offer this over to love, right? And see what happens, see what's said, see what comes up, see what happens for you. And again, we just are the ones that happen to want to share ours with others, but mostly poetry is your own. It's your own medicine. And so I would definitely give that invitation out as well. And again, if that's not, like you so beautifully said, even if this avenue is not yours, cooking is medicine. Reading your children a book at night is medicine. Walking outside in nature is medicine. Playing a sport is medicine. All of it is guidance if you offer, right? If you sit with and you offer, you sit with it, you say, here's the thing, here's my heart. And what is it? What does love want to say about this?
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised at, again, what can come through, how it can come through. Poetry is just one of the ways that it comes through, even just for me, even though it's one of my major ways that I do it, but it's just one of the ways. It comes through many other forms for me too, that I don't share with the public like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, gosh, just what a beautiful world, and a beautiful life that even just this kind of avenue is available to us.
Yeah. It's miraculous. And I mean, I also think, like, the reason I run and hold a community around A Course in Miracles study is because I really believe in community. And I think actually you and I are pretty brave to sit on our own with this. But the picture I'm getting as we've been speaking this whole time is, just creating more spaces where this is the invitation, and we're not just, we get some time together, like a retreat space, and it's like, well, we're just going to give ourselves to this process, and we're going to trust it, and we're going to trust for everybody that if we sit in it together, that, and we're moving our bodies and we're doing other practices as well, but we have space dedicated to this. There's also something about so many of the things we're trying to do on our own.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's write a poem or receive guidance or but we're relational. Human beings are relational.
Mm-hmm.
We receive gifts from what the other person says. We get changed by the poem that gets read out by the person to our right, and then it's like there's that relational piece that I really feel, Jerome. We need to talk about this separately, but I really feel like it really matters to do that, and to actually create spaces where we also get given permission to do this and to listen this deeply and to bring that forward. So I think we have some discussing to do,
Oh,
personally.
well, we do. We do. Yes, we definitely do.
Yeah.
And just in honor of keeping an honor of our time, commitments to this process. Um, is there any last thing you want to say about the body, about being a poet?
So I think just the last thing I'd like to say is that, you know, if you're still listening and you're with us, um, I guess the thing I really want to say is see if you can find a way, and this is all I'm ever doing all the time, and it's a process and it's a life's process, I would say. See if you can find a way to start from the last line of the poem that we shared. Like, start from whatever you're up to, whatever project you're doing, whatever process you're in, whatever, you know, even like the way you work or whatever. What one change could I make? There's always a thing I'm in, like, what one change can I make to kind of really make the foundation of this more loving for myself and inside myself? How how can I really, really dedicate myself to that? And part of that is becoming more aware of, you know, what my real motivations are at the moment in something. Like, am I punishing myself? You know, getting really honest with yourself. You know, what am I doing here? Am I punishing myself? Am I shaming myself? Am I restricting because of, you know, whatever? And just softening into more love, because I feel like that's really what this poem invited me into. And, you know, you've said you as well. And I think it's our work, Jerome. So I feel like that's a really lovely place just to finish, just that very simple invitation.
Indeed. Thank you so
Mm.
much, Holly.
Thank you, Jerome.
Deeply, deeply, deeply fed. And what a perfect, perfect, perfect way to start off this series, as I knew it would be. So I will leave us in the energy of love. Much love, everybody.
Lots of love.
I will see you next. Bye, everybody.
Bye.